Hi everyone, welcome back. To wrap up our series on CPUC Rules 15 and 16, we're going to review one last example. This time, we're going to talk about a non-residential commercial development project. The most significant difference between a residential and non-residential project is the size of the electrical load utilized by the applicant's facility. In Part 2, we discussed how up to 20 homes can be served by an electric transformer like the one shown at the left. Since commercial or industrial developments have much larger electric loads that can be hundreds of times more than residential projects, they typically require much larger transformers. This type of transformer is available in a variety of sizes and serving voltages, and connects to the main distribution system in a manner similar to the smaller one. However, the largest of these transformers require the additional installation of a high voltage switch. The addition of a switch allows the utility to energize or de-energize the large transformer for maintenance or emergency purposes whenever necessary. Let's take a closer look at a commercial development requiring a switch. The facility shown in the image has an electric load that requires a very large transformer. The transformer is connected to the main distribution system by means of a switch. Electric utilities typically use 3, 4, or 6-way switches depending on the situation and the needs of the applicant. Power to the switch is provided by installing cables connected to the utility substation, typically referred to as the line-in. The line-in energizes a copper bus bar within the switch cabinet. A second set of cables are connected to the switch to provide power to additional customers located further downstream of the substation. The very large transformer required by the commercial facility is connected to the switch and energized by closing the appropriate switchway. The unused switchway can be used for additional connections to the main distribution system or to connect additional customers. Because the switch is used to provide power to customers located downstream, and the unused switchway can be used to connect additional customers, the switch is installed under the provisions of Rule 15. The very large transformer in service is installed under the provisions of Rule 16. Now let's look at our example. Let's assume an applicant has applied for a new service for a new commercial facility. As usual, the applicant hires an engineering firm to produce the construction plans required to install the new service. If you recall from Part 2, this initial period of time is referred to as the planning phase. During the planning phase, the applicant designer determines that the new service will require a very large transformer connected to a new switch. The applicant's expense for the applicant designed construction plans, $18,000. Once the construction plans were completed and approved, the project advanced to the pre-construction phase. During this period of time, the utility was then able to provide a construction estimate to determine the estimated construction costs, allowances, and credits. They will first determine the estimated value of the substructures to be installed by the applicant for the work related to the commercial development, $112,000. Second, they will determine the cost of the portion of the work to be completed by the utility, $301,000. The total of $413,000 is what needs to be paid to the utility prior to starting any work. Next, they will determine the applicant's construction allowance. However, the allowance for commercial facilities is not a fixed value as it is for residential projects. The allowance for a non-residential project is calculated by dividing the net revenue by a cost of service factor. The net revenue is based on the applicant's projected electric load, typically estimated for 12 months of service. The cost of service factor is based on several items including depreciation, taxes, maintenance fees, and many other expenses incurred by the utility. We'll assume the cost of service factor to be about 15% for our example. Now let's assume our applicant's projected electric usage for the new commercial facility to be 2,300 kilowatts. The facility runs 8 hours per day, 260 days per year. Given the current electric rates, this results in an anticipated utility revenue of about $1,600,000. divided by the cost of service factor of 15% results in an allowance of about $245,000. Before we move on, it's important to note Rule 15 includes a provision called excess facilities. If the loads provided by the applicant to the utility are greater than what is actually utilized, the applicant may be subject to additional costs or penalties. Also, recent revisions to the rules have eliminated allowances for most mixed fuel projects. If the project is installing both electric and natural gas, it may not be eligible for allowances. Check with your local utility representative for assistance determining allowances on your project and whether your project is affected by the new mixed fuel rules. Since the applicant hired an engineering firm to complete the construction plans at a cost of $18,000, the utility credited back the value of the plans had the utility performed the work themselves, $15,300. And finally, since the applicant chose the applicant installation option, the utility credited back the value of the substructures installed by the applicant and deeded to the utility determined from the construction estimate to be $112,000, bringing the final total estimated cost of the project, less the allowance and credits, to be $40,700. Since the allowance and credits do not cover the entire cost of the project, the applicant was required to make a cash advance to the utility. After including the income tax component of contribution, or ITCC, of 27%, the cash payment was determined to be $51,689. If you recall from Part 1, Rule 15 contains two payment options when a cash advance is required. Option number 1, known as the refundable option, requires the applicant to pay the entire cash advance. This option will make the applicant eligible for a refund should additional customers connect to the new distribution extension. Option number 2, the 50% non-refundable option, allows the applicant to pay only one half of the cash advance required, but eliminates eligibility for future refunds. If the applicant has a reason to believe that future customers will not connect to the new distribution system, option number 2 would be a good choice, since this will require a much smaller out-of-pocket expense. However, this applicant is aware of and involved in a new development on the empty lot next door and has reason to believe that new connections will be made, so the applicant chose the refundable option. Once the costs were determined and cash advances made, the project was advanced to the construction phase. The applicant hired a construction contractor at an expense of $180,000 to install the applicant's portions of the new service. This included performing all of the trenching, backfilling, and installing the conduit and substructures. Once the new facilities were inspected and accepted by the utility, ownership of most of the new structures was conveyed to the utility. The utility then installed their portion of the new system, including installation of the new switch, transformer, cables, and meter. The system was energized and the new customer began receiving power to the new commercial facility. When the construction was completed and the system was energized, the project advanced to the final stage, the cost accounting phase. During this phase, the utility reconciled the final costs of the project, entered the new assets into their rate base, and began the process of billing the new customer for the service of providing electricity. Let's look at the applicant's total investment in the project. The cost of the utility's portion of the construction, $301,000, for which the utility granted an allowance of $245,000. The total cost of the applicant's portion of the construction, $180,000. After the work was inspected and accepted by the utility, a credit of $112,000 was granted for the value of the substructures. The applicant hired an engineering firm to produce the construction plans at a cost of $18,000. The utility credited back $15,300, the value of the construction plans had the utility performed the work themselves. The applicant's total expense, $126,700. Let's compare that to the utility's investment in the project. Based on the applicant's projected electric load, The utility granted an allowance of $245,000. They provided a credit for the value of the substructures installed by the applicant and deeded to the utility, $112,000. They also provided a credit of $15,300 for the cost of the applicant-designed construction plans. The utility's total expense, $372,300. As we talked about in Part 1, Rules 15 and 16 are designed to distribute the costs of projects like this one. The applicant benefits by not paying the entire cost of construction required to receive power, and the utility expands the distribution system and collects revenue for many years to come. Shortly after the commercial facility began receiving power from the utility, construction began on a new industrial facility next door. Also, since most of the required infrastructure was installed by the previous applicant, the new industrial service was able to be installed under the provisions of Rule 16. And because an extension of the distribution system was not required, the industrial applicant's expenses were much less. We've been through the process more than enough, so let's just skip to the industrial applicant's expenses. After the construction plans for the new industrial service were complete and the cost estimates done, an amount payable to the utility of $207,000 was determined. The utility granted an allowance of $313,000 and design and installation credits of $9,200 and $35,700. This resulted in an excess of allowance and credits of $150,900. Since the industrial service was installed under Rule 16, the applicant is not eligible for a refund. However, if you recall, for the first project, the commercial applicant chose the refundable option and made a cash advance to the utility of $51,689. Using the excess from the industrial applicant, the utility is able to refund this entire amount. Cool, huh? Thank you so much for joining us for our series on CPUC Rules 15 and 16. When understood and used properly, these rules help ensure fairness to all Californians, our neighbors, and the electric utilities that provide the power that keeps our state running. We hope the information that we provided was helpful, and approach your next project with confidence and join us for future videos. Knowledge is power, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much.